Mike serves on the Dunwoody College of Technology Board of Trustees. He's been a trustee since 2002. Please join me in welcoming Mike Lejeune.
Well, thanks for having me today. Rich and I commiserated a little bit. We both lived through the Great Recession. Dunwoody has a big commitment to construction. We're 100% committed to construction, so it was rough. But we both learned a lot, and we both came out here and stronger. And I'm really excited to be on the Dunwoody board. This is an exciting time to be at Dunwoody. All of us are lucky. I mean, if you're a student, if you're staff, alumni, it's just a great time to be associated with Dunwoody. I'm so excited about the new programs coming out and the success of the traditional programs. It's just fun. So I'm going to start, the topic is corporate culture, but I'm going to start talking about personal success in business. It's something I've puzzled over for a long time, because you see some people that just seem so good that aren't succeeding, and there's a lot of times it might be coming down to luck, but again, it's just something that's I've always been curious about. I'll tell you a personal story. When I was in my early 20s, I was in a fraternity, and I wanted to be president of the fraternity. And so I ran for vice president, and I got that, I think probably barely. And the way it always worked is all the committees reported to the vice president, and they're supposed to make things happen. Well, nobody ever did what they were supposed to do, and it didn't work very well. And so I thought, my path to the presidency is I am going to do just an incredible job as vice president. I'm going to really crack the whip, and I did. And we made things happen, and we got things going. But I probably rubbed some people the wrong way. Now, there's another guy that also wanted to be president. He took a completely different path. He built relationships, especially with this big pledge class that had just come in. And so he made friends with everybody, and he worked it that way. And while all this was going on, I would talk to different guys in the fraternity and say, "You're going to vote for me, right?" "Oh, yeah." And a few people would say, "Well, I don't know." And I said, "Okay, well, they're voting for the other guy." But I had the votes. We get to the day, I lost. And so I learned a valuable lesson, but it was the wrong lesson. The lesson I learned is people tell you what you want to hear. But that was the wrong lesson. I'll come back to what the right lesson was. So from there I went into the family business. I thought I was going to take over. My grandfather started the business. My father had taken it over, and I thought I was going to take over the steel business from my father. But it was a tough business, and it was tough on him. And he had an opportunity to sell in 1989, and he did. So a new owner came in, and I thought I'd get fired because I was the boss's kid. But instead, I was lucky. And I should say one of the keys to success is sometimes there is luck, especially anybody who's achieved, like become a CEO or a president like I have. Anybody that doesn't say that there was some luck involved needs to look in the mirror. There's always some luck involved. And a lot of times there's bad luck involved that keeps you from something like that. But in any event, this guy that bought the business saw that I had that background and started elevating me in the company instead of firing me, and I eventually ended up being CEO. That was in like 1991. A lot of you are too young to remember the savings and loan crisis, but there was a recession right about that time. And the savings and loans were basically unregulated, and they were lending all kinds of money for commercial construction. And when that collapsed, all the financing went away and everything stopped. So the year before they made me CEO, we finished the Mall of America. We had the biggest year in the history of the company. The next year we lost 60% of our revenue and lost a lot of money. I'm thinking that the new owner was having some doubts. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea, promoting this kid into this position. But by the end of that year, we got called down to Bentonville, Arkansas to make a presentation to do all the Walmarts in the country, and we got it. So then we did that. So then we were off to the races. We came roaring back. But again, lucky. It wasn't because of me. I was in on the call. I had a role in the call, but it wasn't my connection that got us down there. It was somebody else in the company. Got a phone call. The guy used to work at Target in their construction business and came over to Walmart and called us down, and the rest is history. But we had some good years there before I went to FabCon. I had some core beliefs. One of them wasn't anything to do with culture. Obviously integrity is very important. And then it was systems. just making sure you have the right data so you can make good decisions. Meeting structure, making sure you had the right meetings with the right people, getting the right information in front of each other so that we all work together and do better. And then continuous improvement. And not so much continuous improvement like people talk about it now, like lean manufacturing. That was sort of a new concept back then. But it was just always finding a better way, never being satisfied, never being content that we got that we're doing things the best way. And that worked pretty well. Again, not very much of a focus on culture, and probably we didn't have the greatest culture. There was, a lot of kind of a rule by intimidation vibe going on, and that was just sort of the way the steel business was, and that's all I'd ever known. Came to FabCon, I was recruited there, left the family business, even though it wasn't a family business, it was a tough decision, but came over there. So now I'm CEO of a much bigger company, growing company, and I step back and I say, okay, so how did I get here? Not that great. I mean, just ask my wife. And so I started thinking like, there's obvious stuff. Again, integrity is key. So I started thinking, well, is it intelligence? Well, that's not it. When I got out of college, I thought I was pretty smart. But when you actually get into business, you'll meet people smarter than you every day. It's not that. You gotta have a certain level for the job, and I suppose the higher the job, the higher the level to some extent. But beyond a certain level, it just doesn't matter. If you Google the correlation between intelligence and material success, you'll find out that it's a very, very weak correlation. As a matter of fact, once you get outside of technical fields, the higher, once you get past that genius level, it actually becomes a disadvantage. These really, really smart people have a hard time relating to people that aren't as smart. So it's not that. So I looked at, obviously, okay, well, it's not intelligence. Is it hard work? Well, hard work for sure. Hard work's really important. That's just a given. And I thought, well, maybe it's, getting along with people. Nah, that can't be it. You got to get along to an extent, but on the other hand, you don't want to be namby-pamby about it. I mean, we got a business to run here. So we had a lot of success at FabCon, despite the fact that we didn't have the culture that we have now. We could have done a lot better, but it was a boom time. We were building big box retail, we were building Home Depots and Lowe's and Menards all over the country. It was just, big box retail was huge, but industrial was huge too, and those were really our two big categories. So I still hadn't figured out what the key to success was. And people, I've got young kids, and they would ask me, what is it? And I would change from time to time. One time I'd say, well, maybe it's creativity. Yeah, but there's lots of really successful people that aren't necessarily creative. You can surround yourself with creative people. I'd already decided it wasn't intelligence, but there was a role at FabCon that kind of helped me figure it out. The director position. The director position is a tough position at FabCon. So let's say you're the director of manufacturing. Well, you're in charge of making sure that we get, that we're following all our processes and procedures, that we're implementing all these great new ideas, better ways of manufacturing, but nobody reports to you. They report to the vice president. You report to the vice president. So you get the worst possible world. You've got responsibility, but no authority. That's a tough role to be successful in. And we went through a lot of directors, because there was a director of quality and a director of safety. And we finally kind of found the model. I'll even say her name. Her name's Linda Whitmore. And she approached it differently. She approached it 100% as, I'm here to help you. She didn't have an agenda. All she wanted was what was best for FabCon. And she was going to help you. She was going to take her time and explain things to you. And if you had a question or you had a problem, she would help you. It didn't matter if it was in her department or not. She would go get you the answer. And then when she asked you for something, people would walk through fire to help Linda Whitmore. And that is the model. And that's what I finally figured out. The key to success is getting along with people. It seems silly. I mean, they told us to play nice together in the sandbox. It took me 40-some years to figure it out. That's the key to succeeding, is working well with others. So, excuse me for a second. So I noticed that the unsuccessful directors complained about the fact that they needed more authority, and then the successful ones just took it. And they made decisions, and everybody bought in. So how does this all relate to corporate culture? You know, I've talked about personal success. The key to a strong corporate culture is creating an environment where those relationships can thrive, where people can work together, feel good about working together, that everybody can put their own personal ambitions, their own departmental goals aside and work for the betterment of the organization. That's the key to having a great culture. We didn't have it. About 10 years ago, we had an offsite. It was officers, directors, plant managers. And we covered a lot of territory, but we finally started rallying around this idea that, you know, we got a problem. We keep fixing problems, and then they keep reappearing. So I fix this problem over here. 2 months later, it's back. I fix it in this plant, it pops up over in that plant. And I keep going around and fixing the same problems over and over and over again. And I got another problem. Nobody wants to make a decision. All these dumb little decisions are bubbling all the way up to the officers to make. And we're growing, getting bigger. There's too many. We can't make them all. There's not enough time in the day to make all the decisions people want us to make. So what's the problem? Well, a couple of people were bold enough to say, I think everybody's afraid. What are they afraid of? Well, every time there's a problem, we immediately go find out what's wrong. And honestly, I think our first thought is, why did you screw up? So we come at it from that angle. So we get there, and nobody wants to be blamed. So we get there, and we're trying to figure out the problem, and everybody's doing this. And why doesn't anybody want to make a decision? Because they're afraid of being wrong. They don't want to be criticized. So we realized we had to make a major change. Instead of a culture of fear, we needed a culture of confidence. Old habits die hard. It wasn't easy to make a transition. We decided that the most important thing is that our group, the officers, directors, plant managers, we needed to work on our relationship, and we focused on that. Tried to what we call silos. Each department was a silo, and you would, make sure that you guys did a really good job in your department, and then you passed it on. It's like, we gave you good stuff. If you got a problem with it, it's not our problem. Or if there is a problem with it, it was the silo before us that passed on bad stuff, and that's why our stuff's bad. We needed to get away from that. We started breaking down those barriers. And we talked a lot about avoiding finger pointing, focus on the problem, not the individual, eliminate the silos. Everyone bought into cultural change for the other department, not necessarily for theirs. They pretty much thought that theirs was good. But a culture can't change without support from the top. And I realized over time that I wasn't all in. I still had come from this kind of tough guy, steel business and construction and manufacturing. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen kind of an attitude. And I had to change. And a couple things happened that kind of changed the way I looked at things. Right as the recession was starting, I hired a new CFO. I feel sorry for him. He thought he was coming into this great company, and we immediately started contracting. But he had a way of explaining things and describing things that honestly drove me crazy. You might be able to tell that I'm a type A guy. He'd take forever to make his point. And what I realized he was doing is he's trying so hard not to offend anybody. He would deliver his message, and he'd be so careful that that the way he phrased it, he wouldn't pull his punches. I mean, he said what needed to be said, but he'd say it so tactfully and so diplomatically that nobody got offended, and they received it really well. He acted like everybody was super thin-skinned. And then, bam, light went on over my head. He's right. We are all thin-skinned. I mean, anybody who says they're not, again, look in the mirror. We all are. You spend most of your waking hours at your career. You've got a lot of pride tied up in that career, and you don't need somebody, criticizing what you're doing or not taking, proper respect for what you're doing. And so that was really important, and we all started to emulate him, and that was a big change. And the other one, I was talking to my HR director. His name is Tracy Engstrand, and Rich mentioned safety, service, quality, and efficiency. We call those the 4 legs of the stool. Those are the things we focus on. And I was sort of frustrated. We were doing well on one and not on the other, and we were doing well on that one here, but not over here. And he says, Mike, until we get this culture right, you're never going to get the goals, at least not at the pace that you want. Again, obvious, but the light went on again. And now I was all in. And now I realize that this is the most important thing that I can do as a CEO is create the culture where everybody can succeed. And that's what I focus my time on. I'm all in, my officers are all in, the directors are all in. The plant managers were the last ones. They were the toughest ones because they're the ones that, they're out on an island getting all this stuff from corporate. But they're finally all in, and it's made an enormous difference. We spend a lot of time on it. We spend, every month, we spend half a day with that group, and all we talk about is culture. Once a quarter, we spend a day and a half, and all we talk about is culture, and we have a facilitator. And then that night, we go out in groups of 4 or 5 for dinner, continue to build those relationships and work on those relationships. Once a year, we do a 3-day offsite with a facilitator. We talk about almost nothing but culture. So it's not something that you just create and then you let it go. I mean, you got to work on this all the time, and we train on it, and we have meetings, and I go around 3 times a year and meet with groups of like the next level down of management every year. 3 times a year, every plant. In Minnesota, I think I usually have to do 3 because it's bigger, and we talk about lots of things, but culture is a major focus. So, some key precepts to the culture that we try to create and that we are on our way to creating. And by the way, you're never there. You're never, with any culture change, you're never there. It's a journey. But these are the key ones. Integrity, of course. Focus on what's right. That was really our problem. We were always trying to figure out what was wrong and focus on what was wrong. Well, that's demotivating. Focus on what's right. Say thank you. There's an old saying: find somebody doing something right and thank them. And it's really a true statement and a smart thing. You say, well, that's what we're paying them for. Yeah, but they're doing it well. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to say thank you. And like I said, we've got a lot of pride in our work and our job, and it feels good. Treat everyone with respect. Well, that's a bigger topic. What does that mean? Well, the key one, and we talk about this a lot. In fact, just about every time I communicate with the company, I say this, and that's assume best intentions. There's still always that assumption that, my department and the people that I work with, we're working really hard. And we've got some really tough challenges that nobody else understands. If they had any idea how tough our job is, they wouldn't believe it. Well, every department feels that way. And every department is working hard. Every department does have tough challenges. And that's what we keep trying to tell everybody. And everybody wants what's best for Favicon. I mean, are you kidding me? You think that really anybody that comes to work and doesn't want to do well and doesn't want the company to do well? Of course not. Focus on the process, not the person. When there's something wrong, 99 times out of 100, it's not the person. You go in and we look at it, it's the process. Some guy in the office wrote a process, he's never done this job, it doesn't work. The process that he wrote doesn't work. Or this supervisor told me to do it this way, and this supervisor told me to this way, so I got to split the difference and I'm doing this. Or, it could be a whole host of reasons. But it's almost never, again, that somebody came into work and purposely just decided they didn't want to do a good job. That doesn't happen. Very, very rarely. So again, focus on the process, not the person. And then listen. Well, listen, that's obvious, right? But really listen. So listening isn't, okay, I'm making my point. Now, while you're making your ridiculous point, I'm preparing to tell you why it's stupid. That's not listening. Really listen. I made my point, you made your point, we took the best of both points, and now we have this great idea. That's listening. Okay to make a mistake. At FabCon, people are finally starting to believe that it's okay to make a mistake. In fact, you might even get recognized for making a mistake because you were trying to do something really good. I mean, it didn't work out, but we learned something, and now we'll build on that, and we'll try a different way. Explain why. You know, people, when you tell people what to do, tell them why. Tell them the big picture. It takes a little bit longer, but if people understand why you're asking to do stuff, they're much more likely to buy in and do a better job and give you what you really are looking for. Include people in the process, get buy-in. When you're changing something on the plant floor, get people on the plant floor involved. If you're changing something in project management, get project managers involved. Celebrate success. We have all kinds of different ways that we celebrate success. You'll see balloons hanging from people's desks. That's their peers have an opportunity to recognize them. That's all you get is a balloon and a silver dollar, but apparently that's the one that means the most to people. And then there's another one where managers can recognize people and they get gift certificates and things like that and checks, but all kinds of recognition going on. I think that's really important. And then the key one is have fun, and I've always believed in that. Even when I didn't get all this, when I didn't get the importance of culture, man, we spend most of our waking hours at work. And boy, if you're not having fun, probably in the wrong place. I think having fun is really important. So, is it working? Well, we no longer speak of the culture of confidence. We call it the FabCon way. And the FabCon way has led to some pretty great results. Like I said, it's a journey. We're not there yet. We've got more room to go, but a great example was last year. So we had a record year in 2013. We had a big budget target in 2014. If you remember, we had a brutal winter last year. And it wasn't just in Minnesota. We had a brutal winter in Columbus, Ohio. That never happens. But we had a brutal winter in our Pennsylvania plant. And it was just beyond anything we'd experienced. And I think we've had winters like that in Minnesota, but it's been a long time. It was the sort of thing where you bring your whole crew in and you fire all the equipment up and everything would break because it was so cold. I mean, the conveyor belt would snap with tons and tons of rock on it. Okay, so now you got all these guys standing around. First you got to clean up and you got to send them all home. You got trucks 200 miles away to a job site that's 400 miles away, turning around and coming back. Just all kinds of dumb stuff like that. We didn't manage it well. We weren't prepared for it, and we didn't manage it well. And all of a sudden we get to the end of the first quarter and we're way behind budget. But not only are we not making money, we're losing money. And this is the opportunity when you would expect, here we go, back into the silos, back into the bunker. Didn't happen. Everybody rallied. We worked together. We had the best second half we've ever had. We blew through the budget. We crushed the budget. We crushed last year, and we're rolling right into this year with just this great head of steam. That was so positive for our team, and we're building on that now. So really felt the power of the culture last year, and really feeling it even more so this year. It's fun to work at FabCon. We're growing, we're successful, we're hitting on all cylinders on all our goals, and I would say the main thing is the culture. And then the nice little byproduct is we have hardly any turnover. Everybody wants to stay, so we're not losing all that experience. Again, thanks for having me, and I'd be happy to